This week on Quality Digest Live, we attempt to clean up misconceptions about the 5S methodology. Get that, clean up?
Clean up, that's right. Plus, keeping it simple with strategy. That and more when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by Olympus, a world-leading manufacturer of innovative testing, imaging, and analytical instruments.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for March 21st, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, given what is going on in the Ukraine this past week or two, we thought this was an interesting tidbit from ISO, the International Organization for Standardization. Just recently, February I think, ISO released a technical specification, ISO TS 17582, which is a technical standard on how to apply ISO 9001-2008 to electoral organizations at all levels of government. In its introduction, the standard says this: conduct of periodic, free, and fair elections by secret ballot is the fundamental, distinctive characteristic of a democratic political system. As such, the sustainability of the democratic political system is reliant on effectively defined, implemented, and controlled electoral services. So 17582 specifies the requirements, and by the way, you can be registered to 17582. It isn't just a guidance document, you actually can be registered to it. 17582 specifies requirements for a quality management system where an electoral organization needs to demonstrate its ability to manage elections by secret ballot, which provide reliable, transparent, free, and fair results that comply with electoral requirements. So basically what they're saying here is you get, and you can get this from reading both the scope and the introduction of the standard, which are available online at the ISO site. The idea is to look at the electoral process and see how various elements of the process fit into the process approach outlined by ISO 9001 with an eye toward conducting elections that have reliable, transparent, free, and fair results. So this all sounds actually, pretty lofty. And at first I thought, hey, what a great tool to use in a place like, I don't know, Ukraine, Crimea?
Yeah, Crimea.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense if what you want to do is have a transparent electoral process. But then I thought, nah. I mean, this standard, like any other ISO standard, it's a tool for the honest. I mean, my dad used to say regarding, locking your house, locks are for honest people.
Right.
If somebody wants to get into your house, they're just going to break in,
Yeah, right,
or your
exactly.
car, or whatever, right? And standards, ISO standards or any kind of standards, are really for honest people. It's useful only if you really want to accomplish something. If you're not looking to accomplish something, even if you have a standard, you don't necessarily have to go by it. Yeah. So, and actually, honestly, the irony about this, though, is that Russia was one of the signatories on this standard.
Of course.
Of course, as Denise Robitaille, one of our columnists, Denise Robitaille, is also she was the lead U.S. technical expert on TAG 176, which was the group that actually created the standard. And she was pointing out that, obviously Putin and the government, they have nothing to do with these. These are created by people who are interested in standards within the country. But just the same, it was kind of the irony there was actually kind of funny.
Kind of funny.
So,
and of course, we should bear in mind, speaking of Russia, we should bear in mind the words of Joseph Stalin, who said that those who vote matter less than those who count the votes.
Which is exactly what the standard was written for. So there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Stalin. Okay, well, we ran a short news item this week that we found interesting. The piece titled, "If Your To-Do List is Empty, There Is No Fun," was written by Jens Wojnkowski, and it ran in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. As you know, all of us know, we've been covering the Kanban methodology a lot lately. We have a Kanban board ourselves. They're back there in the bullpen.
We even look at it sometimes.
We look at it all the time, actually. So for that very reason, this short piece was particularly timely from our perspective. The title actually came about as a result of a comment from a reader of Wojnkowski's excellent Lean Self blog. The article looked at some of the more extreme permutations of a Kanban board in action. For example, if there's nothing in your waiting and work in progress columns, that's not good, especially if you're employing Kanban at work. Can't imagine too many bosses would be very happy if their employees are basically working on nothing.
Nothing.
Can't think that would go over too well with the boss. Yeah, I got nothing, boss. What do you know, nothing going on here. At the other end of the spectrum, and this is probably a little more realistic, you'll find those with way too much in those columns. If that's the case, especially for work in progress, you're likely to fall victim to the waste of Muri, or overburdening. When it comes to the done column, nobody's happy if that was empty, but if it's overflowing, hey, celebrate.
Sure.
And then clear it out, because, once it's done, it's done. Get on to something else. All this is well and good, but what hit me is when Wojnowski talks about Kanban not at work, but in one's personal life. He takes pains to point out the differences between a Kanban board, a personal Kanban board, and one's own bucket list. We all know our bucket list, the things we want to do before we kick the bucket. For most of us, that's a list that's all too full pretty much all the time. So when you find that your own life Kanban is getting empty in the work in progress column, Wojnowski has a great idea. Pull a few items from your bucket list and throw them on there, so you start moving on them, right? I mean, that's fun. What could be more fun than that?
It's an interesting idea. He's saying, just kind of get going on them. Get working on them.
Get going on the stuff that really matters for your personal enrichment. Great advice there. So for more information on this news item, and in fact all the pieces that Dirk and I are going to be covering on today's show, be sure to check out the story links right below the video player screen, right down there.
This idea of the personal Kanban, and I think we've touched on this a few times before. Wojnowski has talked about it. There's another one of our columnists.
Jim Benson talks about
Jim Benson. It's actually an interesting idea. And we do have actually a lot of quality professionals who apply various quality principles to their own life, sometimes to the chagrin of their significant others. just ask Mike Micklewright. I think Mike Micklewright's got some interesting things from his long-suffering wife, I think.
He's talked about batching from the perspective of doing laundry, I think,
Exactly.
Which is like, how can you not batch? I mean, it's like a sock at a time. I mean, I never understood that, right? I mean, it's like you have to batch your laundry, right?
But it's funny.
Maybe
we have all of these organizational things, and Kanban really is a sense of is a type of organizational skill as well. And we do them so well at work, and then we get to our personal life, and everything just is kind of free flow and come as it will, and you never get anything done. And sometimes it just kind of makes sense to kind of apply these things.
Sure, why not?
If you can.
Yep.
All right. Well, remember about 6 months ago, we discussed the NIST Zero Energy Home. This was a 2,700 square foot home with a family of 4. And I might add, a very well-behaved family of 4, since they're actually all just robots, or actually sensors or pieces of software. And the idea was to simulate, as much as possible, the energy use of a typical family of 4. And this was a mother, a father, I think an 8-year-old and 11-year-old, and see if that energy use could be offset by the various energy-saving elements in the house, as well as its solar water heating and its solar voltaic system. So just to kind of briefly explain what this looked like, you had this 2,700 square foot house, and inside...
See it there, yep.
See it there. And inside you would have humidifiers and heat generators that would simulate a person. So not only heat, but respiration stuff. You got humidity, and you would have washers and dryers that would come on at scheduled times, and showers and baths, and game centers and TVs and stereos. I mean, everything that could possibly go on in a real house was simulated in here, so that as much as possible, under controlled circumstances, they could really look at how much energy could you offset in the house itself. So, okay, that's it. So finally, the energy results are in for the first 6 months, July through December of 2013. And according to NIST, the house generated an energy surplus of 328 kilowatt hours. Now that's roughly the amount of energy that a dishwasher uses over 1 year, from July through October. From July through October, the facility registered monthly surpluses. In November and December, when space heating demands increased and the declining angle of the sun reduced the energy output of the photovoltaic system, the house actually run into monthly deficits. But at the end of that 6-month period, there was a slight surplus. Now, the interesting thing, this report just came out. I mean, we just got the press release, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago here in early March. The report doesn't mention how the house fared in January and February. And keep in mind, this house is just outside of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling it it was not running in a surplus on January and February as they were trying to keep it warm. But it's going to be interesting actually to see what this house looks like at the end of at the end of an entire year, to see whether it actually does generate a surplus or come out close to break even. But the thing that actually interested me about this was if you go to NIST and look up the NIST Zero Energy House. From a geeky point of view, it's just really interesting because of the amount of stuff that went inside to simulate human activity. So, the husband would leave for work, so that heater and humidifier would be turned off.
Right.
The kid would come home and, hop on his PlayStation,
Sure.
so that's turned on, and showers and all that. I would just think it would have been just a great project to work on, is how do you simulate this, that, and the other. So I don't know.
Well, the proof of concept is great. That the fact that there can be a generation of a surplus through these tools. I mean, certainly you have to dial it in. I mean, certainly there probably would be not as much consistency in the use of the robots and the sensors,
right.
although they try to account for that too.
Right.
But the idea that it proves the concept that house constructed such as this can probably, we're going to find out again, as you say, after the
right.
year, can probably actually contribute a net surplus back into the grid.
Which raises another problem is at least I don't know about anywhere else, but in California, it doesn't make sense to generate a surplus because you get credit. The way California works is you get credit for monthly surpluses that come back to you in the terms of a credit towards your bill.
Right.
At the end of the year, if you have a credit, you don't get like a check or anything.
Right,
it's just
right.
like, oh, hey, thanks for the free energy.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, yes, there's no financial reward maybe for
right.
it, but there's a reward of not using that energy,
well,
perhaps. So I mean, it's a balance. Anyway, really interesting stuff. We're going to continue to keep our eye on this one. Again, Dirk will report back in a few more months when we have the full year report.
It's
on
geeky
that.
stuff.
We love it. Okay. We love it. Dirk's a geek.
Yeah.
So am I. Okay.
All right.
Well, next story, first feature article actually of this week is a piece called Cleaning Up Misconceptions of the 5S Methodology. It's an article written by Matthew Barcelow, and it appeared in, I believe, in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. You can see it right there behind me. You can go onto the website and you can check that out. Well, 5S methodology, as we know, really is designed to help organize space, organize workspace and make it easier for people to do their work. And the misconceptions referred to here have to do with the translations from the Japanese language, that Japanese 5S's, to the English ones. And this is interesting to me because I'm a word guy. We're all, we're media people here, so we're all word people in one way or another. And as word people, I mean, personally, I believe that there's always a perfect word for the exact thought or emotion that you want to portray, whether you're writing or speaking, whatever that may be. That there's a precision to words, and there's obviously tens, 100,000, a lot of words in the world, right? In each language. So there's perfect words you can use to express the particular thought that you want to express at that time. And for me, I think close won't do. This isn't like horseshoes, or mines. I mean, this is like you want to be right on it. And I remember thinking about this when I was young, when I was in high school. Reading like Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, and thinking, well, this is it's translated out of Russian, and it's a great story, but there must be nuance. Or we're watching like, I don't know if you're a fan of Akira Kurosawa movies, the Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
I mean, same thing. It's dubbed or subtitled, but it's not the real. I don't understand Japanese, or I don't understand Russian. So, without being able to read it or hear it in those original tongues, there must be nuance that you're losing, right? I mean, and you're talking about obviously works with thousands, tens, hundreds.
And that's
of words.
what Barcelow is dealing with here.
That's what Barcelow's talking about here, and that's what struck me. So, given that, what he's saying, what I'm thinking as well is, what are we to make of the various attempts over the years to shoehorn, that's really what it is, shoehorn the Japanese 5S into an English 5S? And let's back up and give a little history here. In 1986, Masaki Imai first brought the 5S concept to a wider audience here in North America in his book, Kaizen. And Masaki Imai, as many of you probably know, really the founder of Kaizen, one of the architects in Japan of this system, if not the architect. And he originally translated the terms as such, and I'm going to try to read the Japanese here as best I can. Seri, straighten up. Seitan, put things in order. Seiso, clean up. Seiketsu, personal cleanliness. And Shitsuke, discipline. And those are the initial five S's in Japanese, and what Masaki Imai at that time in 1986 translated them into. He wasn't concerned about making them all S's. There was an S or two there, but he wasn't worried about making sure that they all were S's.
In the English language.
In the English language at that
yeah,
time. They were Japanese S's. They meant something in terms of the steps you need to take to organize your workplace and yourself within that workplace to be more efficient. But something changed, and over the course of time, in the 80s, war into the 90s, this methodology was soon being referred to in English as 5 S's as well. And as a matter of fact, Masaki Imai himself, in his 1997 book, again, 11 years after initially presented to a North American audience, in 1997, in his book, Gemba Kaizen, he referred to them as sort, straighten, scrub, systemize, and standardize. And of course, various other meanings, S's, proliferated after that time. And actually, we have a slide which I hope you can see. It might be a little tough to read, but this slide, yeah, it's a little tough to read there, but this slide has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different interpretations of what the original 5 S's in Japanese
and you can
mean
see
in
these,
English.
You can see these if you go to the article and click over to the article underneath the player page. You can see that table.
Yeah, check that out, because again, in Matthew Barstow's article, you can see the table itself, and you can see all the different meanings, and you can see that there's a lot of different play within that of what those things mean and why. I mean, to me, the question is why. I mean, the methodology itself of 5S is really about developing a structure that's obvious, that's clear, that's visible, that makes sense for organizing your work. And it's not about a specific letter S. The letter S is just kind of, it just happened to be that, I think, in Japanese.
Well, get going. I have something to say about that later on. It's interesting. Yeah,
but I think that the mistake we make here is, okay, it worked in Japanese. These 5 S's work in Japanese. They mean something when you understand them in Japanese. But trying to shoehorn them into English, it subverts the whole meaning behind 5S to make things clear and obvious and simple and visual and apparent to be able to organize it in that way. When you kind of obfuscate it by, again, shoehorning it, forcing it into an English 5S, you kind of get away from the very point of 5S. And again, why? And you can talk to, why is it psychology? Is it because we're too dumb to remember what the terms really mean?
Yes.
I mean, what is it?
Look, and by the way, I believe he did exactly the same thing you're talking about was the same thing in Japanese. It wasn't just coincidence. Look at all 5 of those Japanese words. They all start with the same syllable, S-E-I.
Yes.
What do you kind of say or sigh or whatever? Now, I'm sure that was deliberate. It was like, what's an easy way to remember these 5 things? Well, let's make something that's alliterative, because it's easy to remember, alliterative words. You can say, oh yeah, they all started with sigh. Oh yeah, and you can remember. And when you went to English, it was the same idea. What's the easy way to remember?
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's not because, I mean, for instance...
But I'm not sure it's the same there. I'm not sure, like, what do I want them to talk? I want to think about putting things in order. What's something that starts with S that's putting things in order? Oh, you know what I'm saying?
Well, but for instance, Shitsuke is a good one. It's discipline, but it has a lot to do with this idea of being disciplined, or the term saiketsu, personal cleanliness. It's almost, as Barstow is saying in this, it's almost untranslatable. Because it's not cleanliness. It's not make sure your hands are clean. It's a sense of personal accountability to the process and bringing your own self into it, making it work, making you work within it. And it's become like self-discipline.
So your argument would be is don't worry about something that rolls off your tongue. Is just try to capture what the actual meaning is.
Capture what the original meanings are. Yeah. I mean, I think that you're probably better off reading the original Masaki Imai from 1986, Kaizen, where he kind of gets to these topics and explains the meaning behind these, rather than just shoehorning them into 5 S's.
Right,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they're S's. It doesn't matter what letter they are. What matters is the idea that that you're going to have this organizational structure that you're going to bring to your workspace, and you're going to make it better. You're going to improve it through that.
So understand what it actually
means, as opposed to just having these mnemonic devices to just maybe remember it. I mean, mnemonic devices count too.
And of course, speaking of geeks, we can geek out on this because we're word guys. So for us, this is really interesting. I'm sure you found it really interesting though too, right?
Hopefully. Well, crickets? No.
All right. Well, you read Kevin Meyer's article this week, right?
I did.
Thing that struck me about that...
Name of it.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Just a simple strategy.
2 S's.
See? Now we'll remember it.
Sorry.
The thing that struck me about this is that this is a topic that just keeps coming up over and over again. It's something that we talk about both internally and also that we've talked about on the show. And this is Myers describes how when he first became an executive, he was like raring to go. He got his team together to look at the company, and he'd learned all these, SWOT analysis and all this kind of stuff in college. And he was an executive now. He's just raring to go and put all these things into practice. So he got his team together, and they did assessments, they did gap analysis, they developed strategies and plans for technologies and markets and people and quality with detailed action plans for everything that they did, and they all put it together in a huge binder. And what happened to that binder?
Gathered dust.
Actually, it gathered dust. They stuck it on a bookshelf, and it's probably sitting on that bookshelf today, moldering away. They bit off too much. And we've talked about this before. The best laid plans, right? Well, plans are great as long as you can grasp them in your hand and understand and remember what the heck the plans were for. If you have too many, number one, you don't have the resources to act on them, and number two, because you don't have the resources to act on them, you kind of give up on the whole thing, and just like, I can't deal with this, it's too much. It's sensory overload, right? So that was his lessons. So the next time this exercise came up, they used Hoshin planning. It's Japanese, it has to be good. It's Hoshin, baby. Those Japanese, they know where it's at. And you would probably remember what Hoshin planning is. Hoshin planning is a 7-step strategic planning methodology, which has we can put the steps up here on the slide. Identify the key business issues, establish measurable business objectives that address these issues, define the overall vision and goals, develop supporting strategies for pursuing the goals, determine the tactics and objectives that facilitate each strategy, implement performance measures for each business process, and measure those business fundamentals. So it's very structured. And you think, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense, right? We've got this nice structure in front of us. One thing leads to the other. So therefore, we're going to have this nice organization that's going to be in place, and this is all going to work out great. So they did this Hoshin planning the next time out, and they had exactly the same result. Why? Because there were still too many plans. Yes, they were organized. Yes, the strategy led to the goals, led to the plans, and was all nicely laid out, but there were still too many. And the way Myers put it was like this, quote, the desire for detail, specificity, and depth and breadth created abundance and complexity. So what they did to address this the next time out is they simply reduced their long-term strategies to 3, tied to a similar number of intermediate term objectives, 3, tied to about maybe 5 annual goals. So 3 strategies, 3 objectives, 5 goals, and this was actually for a fairly large multi-site operation. Now if you think about it, now they've got something, if you were to probably ask any of those guys, what are your 3 strategies? They could probably remember, because there's only 3 of them. And maybe they put S's in front of each of them so they can help them remember. And the same thing with the plans. What's the plan for this strategy? Oh, well, we've got 2 plans, right? It's graspable. Number one, it's probably a small enough group of strategies and plans that there's actually resources to act on them. So they still used Hoshin, but they did it with fewer elements. The next thing they did is they allowed the plan to evolve and change throughout the years as the situation changed. And I think this is really the critical bit, because no matter how we go about our planning, we sometimes become too invested in it and don't allow our plans to change. And in fact, I would argue that rigidity is just as much a problem if you have 3 long-term strategies as if you have 30. No matter what your strategies and goals and plans are, if they are cast in stone, you're probably just asking for trouble. You've got so much invested in it, including sometimes money, that you go, oh, well, no, we can't change because, we're going down this road, and that's killing yourself.
I would push back on that a little bit, just with one small thing you said. I think that you are handcuffed more when you have more plans rather than less, because by the nature of having put so much work into putting together 30 plans, people tend to want to continue to invest in what they've already invested in.
Right.
You say, wow, we've done so much work on this, we've got to do it. So the fact that you've spent hours and days and weeks and months maybe putting this together, if it's too complex, we'll tend to handcuff you more. We've got to do it because we've done it. We've got to continue to do it this way. Rather than if you do 3, I think you can be more free with it. You say, well, yes, we did it. It only took a day or maybe a week at most. Okay. And we can be more free with changing it on the fly a little bit to adapt to current situations.
I looked at it a little bit differently. The way I looked at it is even if it's just one, because who knows how long these things take to implement, right? So you're 2 months into working this particular plan towards reaching this particular goal, and the situation changes, and you've got, well, gosh, we've already invested, $30,000 in this.
Yeah.
Do we really want to change? No, we've locked ourselves into this plan. We've got to go this direction, and I think that can happen on a single plan. I mean, you've got, at least that's the way I'm interpreting this.
Yeah.
Is you've got to be willing to say, yeah, are we going to throw away some money and time and stuff that we've already invested in this? Well,
I think that's the point. I think the point is to keep it more manageable and smaller, less of an investment perhaps up front to make it more manageable going forward, to break it and reform it. I mean, strategy, Mike Tyson had a great quote, about this. A great boxer from the 1980s and 90s who's now crazy. But he had a great quote. He said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. I think that's true. I mean, you make these plans and you execute them, but then reality hits you in the face, and you say, you know what, we've got to change. We've got to adapt what we're doing because it's either not working or it's not working as well as we want it to. So we make these changes, and I think if you've invested too much in it up front, I think management's going to tend to be more reluctant to do that. Because they say, gosh, we spent so much time, so much money on this. So I don't know. I mean, you can read a couple ways. Maybe the idea is don't invest so much in it up front. Maybe do your due diligence, get the plan together, but realize reality is going to interfere.
Well, I think also, and it wasn't mentioned in this article, but I think it was mentioned in a similar article we did maybe a month or 2 ago, is not only a smaller amount of plans, but also plans that can be acted upon and see results within a reasonable time frame. Mm-hmm. And in other words, if your time frame for a particular plan or a particular strategy is 5 years, it's probably too long.
Yeah,
if it's 6 months or 5 months, then yeah, like you said, I mean, it's such a short-term thing. You complete it, and then if you need to make adjustments after that, you probably can. But this was an issue we talked about, is you can't have these actionable things that are requiring effort over a long period of time, because depending on your industry, sometimes even a year or 2 years is way too long to be working on something, because the market is so fluid sometimes. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. So
absolutely.
Anyway, great article. As Mike said, all the articles that you heard this week are available to you from underneath the player. Just click on them and go out there and read to your heart's content.
Yeah, good stuff this week, so definitely check it out. Okay,
Yep.
Well, that is our show for the week, but before we go, we'd like to thank today's sponsor, Olympus. Olympus is a world-leading manufacturer of innovative testing, imaging, and analytical instruments that are used in industrial and research applications ranging from aerospace, power generation, petrochemical, civil infrastructure, and automotive to consumer products. Leading-edge testing technologies include ultrasound, phased array, eddy current, microscopy, and X-ray fluorescence. The Olympus product lineup includes flaw detectors, thickness gauges, automated systems, videoscopes, high-speed video analyzers, and microscopes for industrial and life science applications. That just about covers it right there.
So it's Olympus.
It's Olympus, baby.
Pretty much everything.
So for more information, be sure to check out the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right. Well, thank you, Olympus, for being a sponsor. Mm-hmm. And thanks to all of you for joining us. And we will see you again next week.
Yeah, next week for another big week at QDD, and next Friday for another great QDL. So happy spring, everybody. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you.